Today we're going to look at the Mexican War for Independence as a continuation of other series of revolutions that have occurred up to this point, such as the American, the French, and the Haitian revolutions. This is just another example of seeing how the wildfire ideas of enlightenment and natural rights and freedom and independence are continuing to spread throughout the world, specifically in Europe and the Americas. So first off, let's start looking at a map of New Spain, what you would know it as Mexico. In this case, it's a viceroyalty, as the nations of Spain and Portugal would typically set up a viceroy over these regions in order to control them. If you notice as you look at this map that a large part of your southwestern regions of the United States are currently controlled by Spain. You're not going to see Texas, for instance, leave New Spain / Mexico until the Texas Rebellion, which is going to happen in the early 19th century, along with the Mexican-American War will end up taking California, New Mexico, Arizona, etc. From Mexico as well in the first half of the 19th century. So the Mexican War for Independence really starts to gain momentum with Father Hidalgo, with his Cry of Dolores. His Cry of Dolores comes in 1810 after a rebellion / uprising that he was part of had been sniffed out and was stopped before it really could begin. So in order to make sure that this uprising continues, he gathers his parishioners together and makes the Cry of Dolores with his famous quote, "Long live independence, death to the Spaniards." Now, Father Hidalgo himself was a Creole being someone who was born in the New World, in the Americas, but has descendants and heritage from Europe itself. Now, the Creoles were typically very influential within Mexico or within the Americas themselves because of their influence from birth or any inherited wealth. And also what makes Father Hidalgo significant is that he was part of the clergy. The Roman Catholic Church at this time was very supportive of Spanish rule, in large part because Spain was a Roman Catholic country, and so the Roman Catholic Church wanted to maintain its influence over Mexico. Now, Father Hidalgo, so in his attempts to free Mexico from Spanish rule, he does lead many series of small revolts, battles, etc., but he's relatively quickly defeated in 1811. But his legacy doesn't stop. Father Jose Morales, who is more of mixed heritage, picks up where Hidalgo left off. He continues to lead this revolution for 4 more years. However, Morales is defeated by a famous Creole, Augustin, in 1815. Now, this is a very ironic defeat because Augustin actually ends up leading the revolt shortly afterwards. In large part of this is because Augustin was what we would consider conservative. Now, in this sense, conservative and liberal is not the same type of meaning of conservative and liberal we might use in political terms today. Conservative was simply more of the standing of they believed to conserve or maintain the political standing or situation that was current at that time, while liberals wanted something different, something more. Typically, it had to do with greater rights and freedoms to the people that were of lower classes. However, Spain ended up having a change of leadership, and the conservatives within Mexico itself didn't want to follow that leadership. And so as a result, Augustin ends up rising up and leading a group of rebels, and with the help of other liberal rebels, they end up winning the independence for Mexico. And in 1823, though, Augustin is actually overthrown, and he goes into exile. Now, you're going to notice this is a constant pattern when we look at different leaders within Mexico, that they're going to gain power and then lose power. Because what we're going to see for the next 150 years, Mexico has a very turbulent time. And we're going to look at maybe what are some of the things that could have affected that, right? That's one of the things I want you to think about, is what could have caused Mexico to have this very turbulent history of a ruler coming to power, a ruler being overthrown, a ruler coming to power, a ruler being overthrown, and end up large part causing a lot of conflict and poverty within Mexico itself. So in 1824, though, Augustin, he returns to Mexico. Probably shouldn't have. He is put on trial immediately, and he is executed as a result of the government that is in place at this time. And the government at this time is considered a more liberal form of government, in the sense that they wanted to grant more rights to the people, and they did this through what is known as the First Mexican Constitution, or the Constitution of 1824. In this, a constitutional Congress is formed. Now, this constitution is overthrown multiple different times, specifically in 36 and 44, and it is finally replaced in 1857. The Constitution 1857, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is very similar to the Constitution 1824, but obviously with its own updates of its own. Which then this leads us to talking about Santa Anna. Santa Anna has a very sporadic history with Mexico itself, with times of ruling. So if you just look at these bullet points itself here, right, so first off, he kind of really gains influence and prestige in 1829 when he successfully prevents Spain from reconquering Mexico. He then is able to come to power as president for a few years in the 1830s, but he really kind of forms more of a dictatorial type of power around himself, around a central state. All powers kind of revolved within this federal government. Well, obviously more of your liberals aren't going to care for this, so in 36, he's going to be removed from power. Part of it is it's going to be easy to remove him from power because he goes over to Texas to help fight against the Texan rebellion. And he is defeated there. In 1841 to 45, he regains power over Mexico and becomes a dictator again. And again, he was removed from power. Well, he's not done. After he has gone from exile, he gains more support from conservatives, and these conservatives again are able to bring Santa Anna back to power. And again, after a few years, he is overthrown. This is very, very common type of history. Notice this very common type of trends that you're going to see in Mexico for many years in the 19th and early 20th centuries. In 1836, you get a new constitution was incorporated that we'll talk briefly about, which was known as the Seven Laws. Now, it's not that it only had 7 laws, because it does have many different articles, etc., that are within it, but it could be summed up into 7 major principles. So, after that, for the most part, it's just continuing to centralize the republic, creating a bicameral Congress, meaning 2 houses of Congress, establishing what the president will look like, the Supreme Court, etc. But a big one to consider is, again, even though you're trying to give rights to people, there's still a lot of restrictions given specifically to women and even some men, and there's restrictions on what citizens had to look like and how much. Benito Juarez, similar to Santa Anna, is also going to have very sporadic history with ruling and not ruling over in Mexico. And his story really begins in 1846 when he's elected to the National Congress. He will then go home in 47 to become the governor of his home province in Mexico. However, in 1853, Santa Anna comes back to the presidency, and since Juarez was a liberal and Santa Anna was a conservative, Juarez is kind of ousted and he goes into exile. But in 55, when Santa Anna is again overthrown, Juarez can return and becomes the Minister of Justice and Ecclesiastical Affairs. Now, this is very significant to Mexican history because in this position, Juarez is going to help eliminate special rights given to the military and clergy at the time, which is very important when you consider the rights of the people, as the military and the clergy very commonly use their power and privileges to their own advantage within nations, and in this case, Mexico specifically. In 1857, Juarez is going to become the Minister of Government and then elected President of the Supreme Court. As President of the Supreme Court, Juarez is now going to be second in line to the presidency. Similar in type of position when you look at if a president of the United States were to die or lose office, the vice president will come to power. And this is going to really become significant because in 1858, the president is going to get overthrown by the conservatives. Juarez is going to claim presidency as second in line to the president, and so you're going to essentially have two people claiming presidency of Mexico, one being Felix Zuluaga and the other being Juarez himself. And however, Juarez really isn't going to win out so much in this power struggle, and he's going to have to more or less kind of back off a little bit. But in the end, Juarez is going to gain control, and in 1860, he will have sole power as president over Mexico. And again, though, even though I say sole power, there is still the liberal idea of trying to provide rights, etc., to the people with elections and voting. However, Juarez is going to kind of get into hot water again when he's going to stop any payments of foreign debts by Mexico. Mexico has large debts that is accrued, and trying to help save the Mexican economy, Juarez is going to stop making any payments to any foreign nations. Well, Britain, Spain, and France aren't going to be too happy about it. France is going to put up the biggest stink, and they're going to overthrow Juarez, and they're going to put in a puppet ruler, Maximilian von Habsburg, who's the Duke of Austria, has nothing to do really with Mexico, put him on the throne to control the Mexican people. This doesn't last very long, and von Habsburg can't maintain control for very long. In 1867, Juarez is going to be reelected. And then he's going to be reelected again in 1871. Juarez is a very popular man within the people of Mexico. However, Juarez will die a year later after his 71 election, and this will end his influence over Mexico. And when Juarez dies, Mexico is going to continue to go into a series of revolutions, overthrows, coups, etc., within Mexico. And this is going to continue on for at least another 50 years. So this is just a continuing issue that Mexico has had in its from the beginning of its birth.